I came to make a film about a stiletto, and I forgot just quite how amazing this place is. Awesome. Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here, and I'm in the Pitt Rivers Museum with Bryony, Assistant Curator.
Hi there.
So my first confession is, I didn't come to make a film about the Pitt Rivers Museum. I came to make a film about a stiletto, and that's going to come. But I walked in the door, it's been a few years since I've been here, and I forgot just quite how amazing this place is. I mean, I've got a smile on my face because it's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. So, starting at the beginning, Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, visit it. I mean, it is not possible to walk out of this place going, oh, that was a bit dull. There is something for everybody. It's just amazing. Amazing place. Medieval, ancient history, ethnographic, Polynesian, African, Inuit. It's just, I'm walking around, Japanese, I'm walking around here, and it has literally a world of fascination. So, Bryony, tell us about the Pitt Rivers.
So we are here on the upper gallery at the moment, which is our top floor of the museum, and that is our space dedicated to weapons, weaponry and armour. And this is because that our founder, Augustus Pitt Rivers, was a lieutenant general in the army by the end of his career, and his main fascination was guns and later weaponry.
So you were saying he's kind of Crimean War era, wasn't he? And then,
exactly.
And then after, so he was operating after that as well.
Exactly. So he saw active service during the Crimean War, and after that he was declared unfit for service. So he returned to England, and he was very heavily involved in training soldiers in the use of weaponry, and in particular he was quite heavily involved in the use of muskets and different types of guns for the army, and that naturally led him from quite European objects and spread to the rest of the world. So we do have objects of warfare from all over the world as his ethnographic collection grew.
But I'm going to stop Bryony there, because now we're going to go and have a look at some of these guns. Right, so first random cabinet that I've come to, and there are lots of cabinets. Look at this crazy thing at the top. I have no idea what it is, but I'm guessing it's sort of like an Indian combination weapon. So this is something that actually we're used to in Europe as well, where this one is some sort of a long mace with a fold-out, flick-out bayonet at the end. Fabulous ribbed barrel here, hollow mace at the end. Little, what looks to me like a very Indian shield. And it's clearly a gun as well because it's got a gun stock on it. So what I did find out from Bryony is actually, and this is what is fantastically interesting as well, is Pitt Rivers split the museum up on categories of object. So this one here, this case is combination weapons, which I have a particular interest in. So 19th century Indian combination weapon there. But then if we come down, I don't know what this is. So that's India again, little axe pistol here, very cute little thing. But then this one is an American revolver. This particular cabinet here is actually labelled blunderbuss. In fact, actually some of these are classically blunderbuss, some of them are grenade launchers. For those of you who don't know it, grenade launchers are not a new thing. We've been using them since the 17th century. But a lovely one there, it's very obviously the case. And this thing, which has to be a grenade launcher, it says large blunderbuss, but it's got a bore on it like that. I mean, that's going to remove your arm if you tried to shoot that as a gun. Again, this is something I have discovered that I love about the Pitt Rivers, is it's a bit like the Wallace collection. In the nicest possible way, it's a bit like a jumble sale. That you look in a cabinet and you're just not quite sure what's going to be there. So I just filmed the grenade launchers just there, just over there. And now I just turn around and I have a helmet made of a pufferfish from Kiribati, Gilbert Islands, Micronesia. Awesome. We have some fantastic stuff here. So this is basically medieval as far as I can tell. So we've got a hook gun here, which is all very normal. We've got a 4-barreled pole gun at the top there, which is just an absolute beauty. Really long one here, sort of serpentine or something. It's not really my world. And then, and I love this, we've got a leather cannon. So yes, they really, really did make cannons out of leather. Can't say it's a normal thing. I suspect they didn't last very long. But there's actually, if you're interested, they did a project up at the Medieval Centre in Norway maybe 10 years ago, where I think they made a leather cannon. So go find out how that ended up. So Bryony, you were saying that General Pitt Rivers started this collection basically because of his interest in guns. Now, that's quite clearly the case. Now, I've actually, to be honest, I've just shown you a fragment of what's here. There's a lot of modern stuff as well. So it certainly comes into like Second World War era. Was there anything post that?
Yeah, and beyond that, I'm not an expert in guns in any sense of the word. But yes, in the case right by the door, there are weapons used very recently in kind of the Afghanistan wars and conflict in the Middle East very recently.
Okay, because actually, I figured that the Pitt River is kind of a museum frozen in time in a way. And that's absolutely not.
Yeah, well, that's a common misconception I think people have about our work. But we are still actively collecting, although on a much reduced scale compared with the kind of collecting that was going on in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Well, lack of room now, I suppose, as much as anything.
Absolutely. And as you will see throughout this video, we have pretty much one of everything already. So the collecting we do now is far more ethical, it's far more collaborative with modern makers and artists. We have a couple of curators here in the museum who work with different communities to commission pieces and have them made in a sort of responsive way to various issues and projects that we have going on. So we are still acquiring, although at a slower rate, and hopefully in a far more equitable, less problematic function.
I'm standing here next to some fantastic samurai armour. Behind me, I've got some more what looks to be sort of Ottoman stuff, or, well, it is, yes, Turkish, I think. And then just a load of European stuff here.
The method of display here is very much cabinet of curiosity type. But that was actually a stipulation of Pitt Rivers when he gave his collection of around 22,000 objects in 1884. He donated them as a gift to the University of Oxford. And this gift did have conditions, and the conditions were that the university were to build a museum or a building to house his collection, that they were to fund a professor to teach with the collection and to teach about the collection. And thirdly, that the collection was kept on display in the same way as Pitt Rivers had arranged it. So you will see cases in the building, primarily in the court, which is on the ground floor, that are, as Pitt Rivers intended them, this kind of typological organisation with material from all around the world in one case. So yes, the sort of jumble that you see with very few labels, that's Pitt Rivers' brand of display.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, let's go find something else to look at.
Absolutely.
So in a way, this case here sums up an awful lot about the Pitt Rivers. So we have some amazing bronze axes here. We go through to an ancient Greek bronze axe, but then we've got Northern European ones here. But then if we come over, we've got a stone axe, flint axe from Ireland, and then Viking axes, fighting axes, working axes, some halberds here, and again, that has to be a very fancy carpenter's side axe, judging by the angle on the blade there. So, although these are all axes, the time span is, I'm going to say 50,000 years and 5,000 miles. So it's just a fantastic cabinet in this 15 objects that we've got here. So I've finally managed to get to the cabinet that I actually came here about, really, which is swords and daggers. Now, I'll bring this over in a minute, but this is where the stiletto came from, this cabinet here, which is my sole reason for actually coming here in the first place. But that will be another film. So we're going to lay the stiletto, my repro, and the original cabinet one side by side and see how we do. I'm currently in love with numbers 28 and 29 here, particularly 29. It's absolutely beautiful. And here we go again, the wonderfulness of the Pitt Rivers. Maltese Schiavona, killer whale dagger from way up in the Arctic. Awesome. And this little space here next to the Navaja. So where we are, that's the Navaja there. Big one. That's got to be 10-inch blade on that, 25-centimetre blade, something like that. And that is where my little stiletto lived. Well, it's obviously not mine, but, you know, I can wish. This is a really interesting cabinet for me as well. And these are all African, actually, but they are, I don't really know what you call them, but they're basic forged items for throwing at people, sort of throwing axe, throwing knife, spiky bit of nastiness, I don't know, make people duck, that's the point. But they're exactly the same, visually a bit different, but exactly the same sort of object as the Hurlbat or Hurlblatt, never quite remember how to say it, 15th century German thing, which looked basically like this. It was just basically cut out a sheep with lots of spiky things and he hurled it at somebody. Makes people duck at the last moment. We will be doing films on those in the future. Lovely. So here's a cabinet of Japanese, Chinese and some other Asian pieces. But again, Pitt Rivers, you know, they've got a lot of stuff and not that much space. Just look above. Just cabinet after cabinet of all the stuff that they haven't actually got room to display in their cabinets. And this, what you can see here, just goes down the length of the showcases. So we've come to this cabinet here of blowpipes, these are really interesting as well, actually. So we'll come to that in a moment. But before we were just talking about how this collection was accrued, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with the Wallace collection, and what makes me quite amused about that whole thing is my understanding of it was he inherited some money, and then he blew his money in a year and a half, and he went to the collectors in Europe and he just went, I want this, 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 and this. And the Wallace collection was basically put together in about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Do you know the timescales of this one?
I'm not entirely sure how long it took Pitt Rivers to amass the original collection that he donated, that was about 22,000 objects in 1884. But the majority of those were in his personal collection and were collected during his time after leaving the military. So probably 30 to 40 years worth of collecting. But other than his brief stint in the Crimean War, we don't believe Pitt Rivers actually travelled very extensively. Instead, he relied quite heavily on other collectors and sort of antiquarian networks to acquire material from further afield than just Europe. So he obviously had some good contacts in sort of auction houses who were acquiring material for him as his collection expanded beyond just European.
Often knowing
weaponry.
What kind of stuff he's interested in.
I think so.
They'd put things in front of him that they knew he might be interested in.
Yeah, I think he clearly knew what he was looking for, and he clearly knew what to collect to build his collection in certain areas. But I think he was, perhaps not always entirely sure what it was that he was purchasing, if he was getting things in bulk from London.
I think that was often the way, actually.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of fakes slipped through, actually. I mean, I'm guessing, actually, this collection is not really prone to fakes in the way that other collections might be, which are very purist on arms and armour and things. I mean, why would you go to the effort of faking a blowpipe? It'd be more expensive to fake it than it would be to buy one.
Exactly.
So, what I find really interesting, actually, is there's a number of these have, well, either spearheads or bayonets, depending on what language you'd want to use. But so you've got your blowpipe, which is presumably, pretty hard wood, so it's going to be quite stiff, quite strong in a way. And then it's got a bayonet on the end, or a spear on the end, which I didn't realise they were dual function. But this lovely one on the end has a wooden cover, safety cover on the blade. But then the other thing about these is a lot of these, of course, we use with poison arrows, poison darts.
Yeah.
And those darts are there, and you can still see that they've got gunk poison, presumably, on the ends of them.
Yeah, that sort of viscous tar-looking substance on the end. We're not going to test it, but we're assuming that we work on the assumption that they are poisoned.
Because my understanding of that poison as well is that it doesn't just fade off over time, and you were saying that it's actually the opposite. It seems to get more potent over time.
I think so. I think we recently found out that Arborus prectorius seeds are sort of little red berries that were often crushed for some poisons. I believe they get more potent over time rather than less. So
now we're into a very familiar world for me here. So there is a lot of crossbows, and I am seeing a windlass bow here, goat's foot levers. It's a very nice one. A lovely composite, I'm guessing German, circa 1500 crossbow. Some pellet bows at the top, later ones here, actually. A very Chinese pellet bows. So pellet bows got imported to Europe, as far as we can tell, from China. So the first ones earlier, a couple hundred years earlier, came from China, and then it became a fashionable thing here. So fashionable, in fact, there's actually pictures of Elizabeth I shooting them, but she's shooting a stag, if I remember rightly, which is not the weapon you'd choose, so it might be a bit fanciful. Fantastic crown bolts here. Come and have a look. It's not a big cabinet, this one, but amongst everything else, there is just so much to see here. But one thing that I have really felt about this place is General Pitt Rivers was a man out of his time. Partly he was in his time that he just acquired stuff, and there's politics about that now. But he seemed to really care about what he was doing and had an interest. He wasn't just In a way, I felt with the Wallace collection, the guy just went, that's pretty, I'll buy it.
Sure.
I get more of a feeling of empathy here. I mean, would you say that sort of...
I think that would be a really nice way of painting Pitt Rivers. I think he, later in life, was really interested in archaeology. He was conducting his own excavations on his land, but he was very keen to collect everything and record everything from a dig. He wasn't just taking the shiny bits, the treasure, the gold.
So in a modern sense, the context of it.
Yeah.
So he would look at where it came from and therefore know a lot more about the object beyond the object itself.
Yeah, and he was very interested in sort of everyday and in technologies, so how things were made, how things were used throughout time. He was of his time in that part of that motivation was to show primitive cultures in comparison to civilized cultures. So there is an aspect of that sort of racist science in his work. But to put a more positive spin on that, it enables us to see objects from around the world together and kind of celebrate that shared humanity and the similarities that a lot of this material has. But he did do a lot for archaeology. He influenced, for example, Mortimer Wheeler.
So Mortimer Wheeler was early 20th century, massively important guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, so sort of early 1900s when he was excavating, and that ripple effect has affected lots of other archaeologists today, the sort of methodology of collecting everything and recording where it was from.
Well, you have collected everything. So when I came in here, actually, you said we have one of everything. And it's like, yeah, I think you pretty much do have one of everything, actually.
Yeah.
No spacecraft, but, other than that.
Well, not yet.
Not yet. Oh, there you go. That's ambition. But Bryony, thank you so much, actually, for allowing me to come here. But in fact, this whole film that you've just watched has been a massively enjoyable sideline from why I actually came here. And that was to have a look at the stiletto that they had in the collection. And I'd already made a reproduction, which is this one here. And we're going to put them side by side and see if I've done a good job or not. And I will make my excuses or adulate myself either way. We'll find out. All right, see you again next time. Bye. So we wrapped this film up. You just saw that. But anyway, I'm on the way out, walk past another cabinet, got to show you. So this is the thing, and this is not a slight on the Pitt Rivers at all, but Pitt Rivers has 22,000 objects in it. You can't know everything about everything, and you can't update everything all the time. So some descriptions are old. Now, I'm guessing the description on the dagger I'm about to show you was probably done way, way back, maybe by General Pitt Rivers himself. So look at this dagger here. So that is an English hammerhead dagger, late 15th century, maybe about 1460, 1490, very similar to the Wakefield hanger style. So on no way on the planet is that Iron Age. But then this one here is also listed Iron Age as well. And again, it's a double-sided blade, really heavy. Looks like to me a rondel blade, but actually that guard is not. So it could be a late, reasonably high status bollock dagger. It could be a Swiss German basilard of some kind. Little bit difficult to tell. Could be something else completely entirely. Again, what it's definitely not, this one here, is an Iron Age dagger. You have to forgive museums for this. They can't keep up with everything all the time. And new knowledge comes all the time. But they'll update it sooner or later and it'll be right. And then we can all move on. But in the meantime, it gives me a little chuckle.